Hi there and welcome to Code the Future. Today on the show, we're sitting down with Ariana Eisenstein, co-founder and CTO of Pickle Robot, a company that is automating one of the toughest jobs in all of logistics and one that is notorious for causing a whole host of workplace injuries. And that's the unloading boxes off of trucks into the warehouse, box after box after box. And you and your team have created a pretty ingenious invention to eliminate a lot of that manual labor, that grunt work. So great to have you with us today. And maybe you can, I know I kind of breezed over it, but how would you describe Pickle Robot to a 5-year-old, say?
Yeah, so Pickle Robot is a physical AI company working on automating areas of supply chain logistics, starting with our unload product. And this is maybe a little bit more than a 5-year-old, but we really see ourselves as a systems company. We really want to develop a full product that covers the whole product, the whole need, and not sort of bolting AI on at the end, but really utilizing it to solve the problem where it's most effective.
And how did you come up with the idea initially for the company? What was the gap in the market that you saw that you thought, hey, we can do this better?
Yeah, so we actually started with, in 2018 when we were founded, my co-founders and myself were looking at the work and manipulation coming out of academia and seeing that robots were finally able to use their hands in a way that didn't take, these long planning pauses. And we said, okay, there's a technology difference. What can we accomplish in the market? And we looked at tons of industries across agriculture and industrial. And, actually an investor tipped us off to go check out the logistics space. And we ended up in a warehouse at 11 o'clock at night on a tour and watching people unload these packages and talking to the warehouse workers, hearing them say, I've only done it, none of us have been here longer than 90 days. And when you ask them why, this job is so hard. It's the middle of the night. It's cold. It's, as you said, very strenuous labor. I'm looking to move on to something else, hopefully very soon. And my co-founders and I and myself kind of talked to each other and we said, thinking about these advances in manipulation, if you could get a robot to unload one of these parcel trucks, you could get a robot to do anything. And this was actually a problem that when we started talking to customers about it, even in those early days, they said, we've been trying to automate this since the 80s. We haven't found a solution yet. And so we saw the technology was starting to change. There was a technology wave to ride. It was a massive market need. And here we are 8 years later.
So if I walked into a warehouse that was using one of your systems, what would be the first thing that would tip me off that is something different than a traditional warehouse?
Yeah, so, it wouldn't be super obvious to see at first because we really pride ourselves in being a very low to integrate solution. We don't require a lot of warehouse modifications. So it's often not, we'll be one of the first pieces of automation that our customers will purchase. But the first thing that people normally notice about the robot is that it's bright green. We really wanted to focus on making the robot approachable and friendly, for lack of a better word, to the people on the warehouse floor who, work with the robot and around the robot every day. And so it's bright green. It's called Pickle Robot. We want to make sure that automation feels like it's a help, not a hindrance.
And so what does that, you obviously want to engender trust and acceptance of this new, innovative technology when you're deploying it. What does that look like? How do you go about building that trust when you go to deployment?
So it's really interesting to think about. We're going into these industrial spaces, these warehouse spaces where people have already been working around industrial machinery, and there's sort of a set of practices, procedures, and ways of, humans interpreting what the machine's doing and the machine sort of notifying I need help or I'm in a dangerous state at this moment. And so we've really been able to adopt a lot of those practices to make the robot sort of communicate in the way that the rest of the industrial equipment is communicating. Additionally, we've really focused on working with the current staff, teaching them about the robot, allowing them to ask questions about its operation and why it's operating the way it is, training multiple people up on how to use the robot. We're able to show up on a Monday, start picking by Wednesday, and have run 2 days full of training such that the end users can be operating this robot by the following week. But we're always available with sort of local support to continue to address any questions or issues that may come up.
Talk to me a little bit about the labor piece in terms of, how much quicker is it compared to traditional, man hours, person hours, what have you?
So the how much quicker is a bit
Is that the
variable.
metric of success, or is it?
We really want to what we really want to do is what we have found out as we've deployed is that every warehouse is a process, and we really want to match the rate of the downstream process. We don't want to go any slower or faster. So it's really not about how much faster than can we be than labor, but how much more reliably, and what is that reduction in sort of workplace injuries or turnover that the customers can then say, someone who is tending a robot tends to have more longevity with a company than someone who's having to unload the boxes.
Yeah, okay. I want to spend a moment talking to you a bit about the safety and the trust piece that we sort of spoke about earlier. And we actually just released this new Inside the Robot Architecture Benchmark Report study. We surveyed 1,000 robotics developers in 7 different countries around the world, asking them about their pain points in development, what keeps them up at night, how they think about the future. And there were a couple of interesting stats that jumped out at me. The first was 84% of people say time and budget pressures can lead to compromises on safety. Now, the other thing that jumped out at me was that 2/3 said the regulatory burden, certification requirements are slowing the deployment of their systems to market. And I guess I'm kind of thinking about, Pickle Robot. How do you balance that need to be innovative and get these new generations of products to market, but also, you're operating in environments where there's workers all over the joint. So how do you marry the two? How do you operationalize that safety in a warehouse setting?
Totally. So first, I'm proud to say we haven't ever had a workplace incident with one of the pickle robots. 100% safety record, and we take it very seriously. What we found is the safety system is for both regulatory, but as well as just peace of mind. You develop it as an entirely separate system from the rest of the autonomy or operational stack. And, the standards can give you sort of that guidepost to where you understand what the other regulations are and are able to meet those and have confidence between yourself and your customer in those regulations. I think that we've been able to, leverage the fact that in these industrial warehouses, we are able to communicate about a robot as a piece of industrial equipment. And so, we always want to add second and third layers of redundancy, but we found just training and talking to people about how this is a piece of industrial equipment, treat it the same way you treat someone driving a forklift or, some piece of industrial machinery, has really allowed our customers to sort of respect it and understand, not to get too close or attempt to approach the robot while it's operating. It stops automatically, but, they understand that that it can be dangerous to be in that workspace.
Yeah. And so, you talk about sort of the forklift example. Warehouses can be extremely busy places, noisy. How do you think about intent with Pickle Robot and communicating so that the other workers know what's next, or 3 seconds from now it's going to be doing X? I sort of think about the traffic stop example where I see the car in front of me that's doing a left-handed turn. I know what's going to be happening. We don't really have that same sort of common nomenclature yet or standard, do we?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting because, again, in industrial settings, I think that there is a little bit of that nomenclature. The robot has a safety stack light where it, based on the color of that stack light, it lets anyone in the warehouse know whether the robot's safe to approach or not, which matches the same sort of lighting structure that the rest of the equipment has. The robot has sort of a set of sounds and lights that flash when it goes back to autonomous operation to let anyone around the robot know I'm resuming autonomous operation. Finally, we're a bit fortunate at the dock door where we're primarily in a workspace that while there are people around it, there isn't humans inside the trailer while we're operating. So we actually have sort of a
best environment you could be in.
Pretty much 5 sides are blocked off from a person entering during the majority of our operation.
Yeah. When you're having discussions or early stage discussions with potential customers, prospects, what do you find is the biggest barrier to them saying yes? Is it sort of how long is it going to take me to get the ROI? Or
I think the ROI is a really great way to look at it. What they're looking for is, can you match, the current performance that we're seeing with our current process? And in matching the current performance, can we, what are the types of savings we get, and when do we earn back the cost of that robot? due to a combination of some pretty diligent market research, a really talented sales team, and a really thoughtful pricing structure, we're pretty much able to deliver ROIs to our customers within, at minimum 2.5 years, but most regularly under 18 months.
Wow, that's amazing. I want to turn to a moment to the next generation. I know you came out of school and created this company. You're kind of like the poster child for what success could look like. So I'm sure, you think about giving back and what is that next generation. How can you help that next generation? When you think about the people who will be building the robots of the future, what do you tell them in terms of why they should get into this space as opposed to apps or some other aspect of the tech economy, AI?
Yeah, so I think that what drew me to robotics, and what I really think that, if you're drawn to these things, you should also come and join robotics, is, we're seeing all these advances in AI and large models. And, for me, the most important thing that these models can do is help people and help people in the physical world. When you look at, go find a problem you're very passionate about. What sorts of physical labor do they dislike? Do they hate? Is it dirty, dull, or dangerous? Our classic automation tropes. And if these types of things inspire you, robotics is such a multidisciplinary topic. It takes so many different skill sets to build these robots and make them effective. It's really a full suite of subject matter experts. Find the piece of that you're passionate about and learn as much as you can.
Speaking of passion, is there a particular robotics use case or application that you're really excited to see come to fruition or into mass adoption and acceptance, that you would incorporate into your day-to-day life?
So the thing that I'm most excited for robotics looking forward is we're seeing this sort of explosion of different form factors and different autonomy stacks that are all tackling our own sort of individual niches, both in the logistics industry as well as more broadly. And I think that as these technologies become more reliable and more performant, the thing that really excites me is what happens when they all start working together. And working together in the physical world. So we've seen in the digital world, orchestration of AI agents. What happens when you can orchestrate physical robots such that they all sort of overall perform or better? And like I said, a warehouse is really a process. And how can we optimize that process using automating not just one step of the process, but the whole piece? And that, I think, will involve a bunch of robotics companies really coming and working together, which is going to be really exciting to see.
Gotcha. So that's the bright future. What about the storm clouds on the horizon? What do you worry about, or you're not sure we're fully there yet? Or
I think that, as we think about bringing these technologies to the real world, it can get really exciting to be in the lab and be doing a bunch of science, but you really hit that innovation when you have to solve these engineering challenges that come from going to the field and interacting with customers and solving for what they really need, not what's sort of the most fun and interesting problem that I've thought of this morning.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So always our final question is, if you could go back in time to your younger self when you were starting out, what piece of advice would you give yourself, knowing what you know now? And I kind of want to tweak it to, before you started Pickle Robot, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, what a great question. I think that I would tell myself to really look for the lessons along the way and make sure that I'm capturing all the learnings, because we've really pushed ourselves to be in the field, to be in market, to be pushing the boundaries of what's possible. And sometimes you're moving so fast, you don't take a moment to reflect, well, what am I learning here and how am I getting smarter? And you have to sort of relearn some lessons over the years. So taking a moment to collect and understand and then move forward.
Digest.
Yeah.
If only there were more hours in a day, right?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, it was great talking with you, Ariana. You got an incredible company. Very excited to see, where you guys go in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for talking to me.